It's safe to say that World War II affected all generations. Raymond and Elaine Zabel lived through the war, and though they were young, the memories still hold strong.
Let's see, I was born less than a month after World War II started when Germany invaded Poland, which I think was September 30th. And so I remember growing up during the war. I can remember seeing headlines about the war in the Philippines, because at that point I was starting to read. I could actually read a lot of things. And being a typical boy, I was following the war closely. To me, it was exciting. But living near the coast the way we did, we also had blackouts. We had rationing. I remember the rationing coupons, the little meat coupons, and there's also gas coupons.
What about sugar and coffee?
Well, I don't remember the sugar and coffee so much, but I remember the meat coupons and I remember the gas coupons.
They couldn't get sugar and things like that. You had to go with your tickets and stand in line to get coffee and sugar and certain things. There just wasn't enough to go around.
Along with the war came necessary procedures like blackouts and school drills.
During the blackouts, all you would have lit in the house would be a candle on the table, but all the shades would be drawn, everything was pulled down tight so that there was no light showing in case of air raid.
War was a difficult concept for children to grasp.
What I remember mostly was I was in school and we would have drills in case of nuclear attacks, atomic bomb attacks, and what we had to do in our school at that time, and that was probably in the 3rd or 4th grade.
As a very young, 1st grade, 2nd grade, we would have air raid drills.
Yeah.
And we'd have to, in school, the sirens would blow. We'd have to get down under the seat of our desk and huddle under with our heads covered and our arms around us.
That's right.
We had to practice just in case.
Your poor grandmother trying to explain to me what these were. It was almost like her trying to explain why a fan fell out of the box at Ebbets Field. A horse and wagon that used to come through collecting metal, scrap metal for the war effort. And we also had a guy that had a horse and wagon that delivered ice to the people across the street from us, because not all of us had refrigerators yet. But in fact, we had an old ice box in our cellar. Yeah. To a small child, you don't really grasp the significance. It's just an excitement. It's something that's exciting to you. It wasn't until much, much later that I realized what was going on or what had happened.
Despite the chaos around them, kids were kids and still found ways to have fun.
But one of the games we used to play, my next door neighbor, Terry Tomasco, and I used to play a game where we had flashcards of airplane silhouettes, and we could recognize the silhouettes of all the American planes and all the German planes and all the Japanese planes, and I think some of the British planes too. And you could see, who could get the best score with these flashcards on these silhouettes. My father was working long hours, and he was a machinist. He never went into the war. He was making, I think artillery parts or something, and he was coming up on being called about the time the war ended.
Women began to take on different roles in this era.
Women's role in industry, probably in my area, was more accepted because I lived in an industrial area, and when the men all went off to war, the women had to fill in the roles, a lot of those roles.
Good point.
Where you lived in a more suburban type of environment. But it wasn't until much later that I was aware that there was ever an issue about that. What's a man's role and what's a woman's role? Yeah.
I grew up in a very traditional household where the women stayed home, took care of the family and the household responsibilities, and the men went out and worked, and that's just how it was. My aunt got a job working for the telephone company in Philadelphia, And all the women in the family were horrified that she wasn't going to be home for her children after school, and she was going out to work. And this was just not proper. It was unheard of. Women just didn't do that. So she was part of the breaking of the mold, you might say. She was getting out there, and boy, she worked after that. She was never home again.
All week long I dreamed about our Saturday date. Don't you know that Sunday morning you can sleep late? Give me 5 minutes more